Welcome arborists. Thank you for joining us on this practical demonstration of aerial device inspection, setup, operation, and emergency evacuation procedures. My name is Cody.
And my name is Joel. And we are excited about this opportunity, and we are confident that after this session, you will have a better understanding of how to operate a bucket truck safely.
Bucket trucks have huge benefits in our industry and have been around for a long time. But with any piece of equipment, if not used properly, or if not adequately trained by your employer, you're running huge risks and death or serious injury can occur.
So what are we waiting for? Let's get started.
Let's do it. So we're going to start with pre-operational inspections. You're required to conduct a pre-operational checklist every time you operate an aerial device. There's lots of resources out there. The big main resource would be included with your aerial device. So there's operators manuals, there's maintenance manuals, and you always want to make sure that your company has inspection sheets available to the crew on a day-to-day basis. So this is our inspection sheet. We have a checklist here that we check every time prior to operating this machine. We also have the resources that came with the truck, so a whole binder of operators manuals, maintenance manuals, that'll tell you everything you need to know about the stability and proper setup and use of this device. Okay, so I'm just going to grab our inspection checklist. I'm going to do a quick walk around on what to look for and how to properly inspect an aerial device, such as this bucket truck. Okay, so obviously we want to start off with oil levels. So engine oil. We've got the cab open here just to make sure we got coolant. Engine oil levels are up and good to go. If you look over here, we have the hydraulic oil level, so that's definitely something you want to look for every time. You want to look at the reservoir and make sure that you have the proper amount of levels there, proper amount of oil in there. Slow leaks over time can accumulate in a big loss of hydraulic fluid. So you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on all those levels. So next thing you want to look for is loose parts. Okay, in general, if there are loose parts rattling within the bucket or within the truck, you want to look for that. Damage to structures, so we're looking at the frame of the truck in general. You want to make sure that there's no cracks or damages to that. And one thing you can do at the shop prior to getting to your job is do a holding valve check on your outriggers. So you don't necessarily need to do your valve check on your boom yet. You can just do your outriggers. As you can see here, we have our outriggers extended, and just by simply extending them and leaving them for a few minutes, you can tell whether or not they're drifting or not. Lights are operational, so all your flashers and strobe lights are working. You want to be able to be seen, especially on roadside work. Safety equipment, so pylons, wheel chocks, anything you need, road signs in terms of traffic control. You want to make sure that you have those ready on the truck prior to leaving the shop. You also want to look at tire inflation. Give a good old kick test. You can also check the valve stem as well with the gauge. Make sure you have proper amount of PSI in each tire. That can also create a risk of stability in terms of bucket operation. Yeah, every time you operate, you just want to quickly check for those things. So once you've inspected from the ground everything you need to, the frame, oil levels, we're going to head up and inspect the boom and the bucket and all the hoses involved up there, up top. Always remember when you're climbing up onto a bucket truck to maintain 3 points of contact at all times. So once you're up by the boom, there's lots of hoses exposed. You want to make sure that you're looking at each hose. You're peeking around, you're feeling for any oil substances or leaks. Get rid of any debris that you might find inside here, hindering your inspection. Yeah, just take a good look at the hoses. Make sure there's no loose parts or cracks. You want to look at the rotator as a whole. If there's no cracks coming through that frame there, that's a very important part to look for. And anything in the boom as well, you want to look for cracks. Again, welds that are cracked. Maybe the operator the day before had this truck and he aggressively boomed down and suddenly stopped and maybe cracked a weld or damaged something that he didn't notice or didn't care to report. So it's your responsibility as the operator just to look over all these things. Look at the knuckle at the end. Make sure there's no loose bolts or parts over there. The entire frame of the bucket truck. So these get inspected yearly by a certified aerial device mechanic. They also get dielectrically tested for work around hydro. So we're not doing that on a day-to-day basis. We're doing more of a visual inspection, making sure there's no leaks, cracks, loose parts, maintaining the grease points. So obviously having proper greasing. The rotator is important, the knuckles, the dump as well, making sure we're greasing all those points at least on a weekly basis is very important for operational maintenance. And if you look here, again, there's debris that builds up in our industry. We obviously have lots of tree parts coming into the bucket, so just keeping this clean, keeping it clear, and making sure that we have a clear view of all the hydraulic lines and parts that we need to inspect. So part of your pre-operational checklist should be a holding valve check or a drift test. What is a holding valve? What does it do? Well, each function of the bucket truck, each hydraulic cylinder has a holding valve. What the valve does is it maintains the pressure in that one function, no matter what happens to the hydraulic oil levels in the rest of the truck. So if your boom is up and you're working the tree and you have a hydraulic line burst down below, those holding valves will hold the pressure in those functions. The hydraulic oil doesn't leak out of those check valves. So when you do a drift test, you're making sure that those check valves, those holding valves, are working properly. So a drift test, basically you're looking for any drifting or movement once the truck is set up and shut off. Any drifting or slow movements, you're going to want to report that to a mechanic and then get it fixed immediately. Because if you do have a faulty seal, the results can be catastrophic and there could result in injury or death as well. So making sure that you do a valve check in your operational checklist is important. Every truck has different ways, different manufacturer guidelines for this. You're going to want to check each function, lower boom, upper boom, rotator, outrigger, and making sure that each function gets checked for drifting. So refer to the owner's manual for those specific instructions. We're not going to get into that because everybody kind of does it differently. Every manufacturer has different guidelines. So yeah, just making sure you know what a drift test is. You're checking those holding valves to make sure that in case of loss of hydraulic oil, the truck will maintain position. Okay, so there's just some quick ways we can measure sag or drift in a bucket truck. Here we have the cylinder, which can be measured. So take a measurement here, or just a hand length or whatever you want to do. Grab a measuring tape as well. Take that measurement, let it sit for a couple minutes, come back, measure again, making sure there's no sag or drift within the cylinder. You can also measure the distance for the upper boom to the ground, bucket to the upper boom to the ground, or to the cab of the truck. So there's just a few different ways to do drift tests. Everybody kind of does it differently, but refer to operator's manual again for specific instruction.
All right, so we're done our inspection and we're ready to set the truck up to perform the work that's at hand. So we're going to talk a bit about stability. So we're going to look at the level of the ground where we're setting the truck up. Rule of thumb, we should always be putting wheel chocks down. Even if it's on a level surface, we'll just throw some wheel chocks out. So we got wheel chocks here. Throw one under there. And we're going to put one behind the wheel as well. Obviously, if you're facing downhill or uphill, you'll put both wheel chocks on either side, depending on which way you're facing. When setting up a bucket truck on uneven surfaces, you should always be within the 5-degree mark. So we have on the side of our truck, we have an indicator here, a gauge. So right now we're sitting pretty about 1 degree, but when setting up, should always be within that 5-degree mark, frontwards and backwards and side to side. So we also have another marker here, and that gauges the tilt of the truck side to side. So you can adjust that when you set up the outriggers with blocking or more pads or whatever you need. Soft ground conditions. Let's say we're going to put the outrigger down and it's on a lawn. The lawn's really muddy, wet, it's been raining all night. So we got a couple options here. We got the standard pad that we have on our truck all the time, right? So you can put that down. And this is pretty solid conditions here. I think that would be okay for here. But let's say that we got a bit more wet conditions. So we have another pad that we keep on our trucks. So that one's a bit bigger. And we can throw this one on top of that, like so. And that's gonna dissipate the amount of force coming down from the outrigger. I mean, if the conditions are really soft, go ahead and find a piece of plywood or anything and dissipate that force even more and kind of build it up as well. Alright, so each outrigger on each side of the truck should have an indicator. As you can see on this truck, we have a green line here. That's the indicator to make sure that the outrigger is down far enough so that you can operate the aerial lift. Some trucks are pressurized, so you need to have enough pressure pushing down on the outrigger in order to function the controls up top. Other ones are just pure length. So we're past our indicator there, so we're good for a setup.
Here.
Sure. Okay, so let's imagine that we're setting up our truck on a bit of uneven surfaces. So our truck is perfectly level right now, but as you can see, we have a couple inches of play there. So some bucket trucks require you to have the wheels touching the ground. There's also other bucket trucks out there that it's okay to operate with the wheels off the ground, but for this particular unit, it requires to have the wheels making contact with the ground. So what we have here is we have some more blocking. So what you do is you just put that underneath the tire, like that, and then you would lower the outrigger enough so that it's touching. So there we have the tire making contact with the blocking, which is making contact with the ground. And that tire is very sturdy, and that's not going anywhere. So the reason why we put some blocking underneath the tires, one, the operational procedure for using this truck indicates that you need to have the front wheels making contact with the ground. Two, it's to do with teetering. So if you have these outriggers down, even though your truck is level, if you have a space between the tire and the ground, if you reach the bucket truck over the front of the cab, it creates a bit of a teetering effect, and it teeters on the outriggers. So this prevents it from teetering, and you'll have a lot safer and smoother operation if you prevent the teetering factor. That's good for a setup on uneven surfaces.
I'm going to talk a little bit about some practical tips for job site setup. So when when setting up a bucket truck, you want to be able to orientate your truck in such a way that you can actually reach the spot you want to get to in terms of relation to positioning, your turret location, and where you need to go within the tree. So as a rule of thumb, I'll always make sure that my turret is clear, my area above my turret where the bucket rotates. I want to make sure that I can get my lower boom all the way up, and then I can actually get out of the rest of the boom. Make sure there's no branches directly above me. I want to be able to make sure that I have full range of motion where my turret is located on the truck. Okay, so one thing I like to make sure that I'm working off of is I'm working off of the bucket side. Okay, if I'm reaching over the boom of the truck, of the device, or over the controls, I can't reach very far. There's lots of things in the way, and I'm not going to have much control over whatever I'm cutting. So it's always ideal, in the best case scenario, to be working off the bucket side. So when you're setting up your truck, make sure that you think about these things prior to positioning your truck so that you can work off the bucket side, which is most ideal. Next thing we want to make sure is you're clear of hydro. There's no wires above your boom so that you can't even get out of the rest. You want to make sure your turret area is clear again, and just make sure you have free range of motion, and making sure you're always keeping eye contact on your lower boom as well throughout the job. A lot of the times you forget about your lower boom and you're just worried about the bucket position, and perhaps there is hydro behind you across the road, or your lower boom's quite a ways down, and then there's a large truck driving by and your boom's in the way and you can get struck by it in that sense. So just making sure you're keeping an eye on your lower boom, and making sure you're keeping that in your head, making sure that there's no hazards being created there with your lower boom. So next thing you want to do is don your harness. So before, obviously, you put on your harness, just like any piece of climbing equipment, we want to do an inspection. Okay, so things we're looking for, again, you guys know how to inspect your gear. It's the same as a climbing harness. You just want to inspect the webbing, all the stitching that's different colors is going to tell you that it's a good spot for inspection. Okay, you want to make sure there's no frays, cuts, abrasions. You also want to inspect your lanyard. This is a shock absorbing lanyard. You want to inspect the clips, making sure that the function is working on the clips. Inspect your attachment points, cracks, all your webbing slings, your leg straps, all the buckles. You want to make sure these buckles are fitting properly and that they're not going to come off with just one being disengaged. So you want to make sure you fiddle around with it and making sure that this stays on even when you're fiddling with it. Okay, so just making sure these buckles are intact. Any attachment points, again, beaners, 3-second inspection, making sure those are closing properly, and so on and so forth. So another thing with these fall arrest harnesses is there should be a inspection tag. So in this one, it's in behind the harness. There's a tag here with all your inspection dates. So these are done by a certified inspector. When you take a working at heights course and you learn how to properly inspect this gear, that is adequate enough to be able to just sign that tag as a yearly inspection to make sure that the harness is inspected annually. So again, anytime you're working at heights, you're going to be taking a working at heights course with a certified provider, and you'll demonstrate how to properly inspect the harness. So I'm going to again put this on, and we're going to get up in the bucket and do some rescue procedures. I'm going to talk about properly fitting a harness. You don't just want to slap this on and have it loose or too tight. There are some things you want to make sure you're doing to make sure it's fitted properly. So I'm going to put this on. Look at that, beautiful. Okay, so some things to make sure that you're doing properly with fitting is you don't want your leg straps too loose. Okay, a loose leg strap is going to ride up if you were ever suspended by your dorsal attachment. It's going to ride up your body, and it's going to be very uncomfortable. So you want it to be relatively snug, but not too snug. Okay, so these buckles have a little lock, unlock feature. So I unlock it to adjust. And I'm just gonna tighten up on that, making sure I can still get 2 fingers under there. And then I can lock it. Same with this other side. So that's a bit too loose. Like obviously I can fit my whole arm under there. You want to make sure that you can, you know, get it 2 fingers under there comfortably so it's not cutting off circulation, but that is snug enough. Okay, so same thing with your upper strap. If it's too tight, you're gonna be restricted in your mobility, so you want to make sure that it's relatively snug again. You can fit 2 fingers underneath. I have full range of motion, but it's nice and snug at the same time. And don't forget about your hip straps. A lot of these harnesses have tensioners here, adjusters here, so I can really tension up on my hip straps. And then same thing, it's tight, but it's not too tight. So making sure it's fitted properly. In the event you do get suspended from your dorsal, you're gonna thank yourself for fitting it properly, because if it's not fitted properly, you're gonna be very uncomfortable. Properly fit your harness, and we're good to go.
Emergency readiness procedures. So best case scenario, if someone's flying the bucket and something happens, the best case would be to have a trained and qualified and competent worker on the ground who can operate the lower controls on the bucket. So I'm going to show you the lower controls. This is the selector valve. So that operates or changes the fluid to go to the upper controls where the operator is flying the bucket. So slap that down. And then obviously if there's no contact with hydro or anything like that, if the truck is not on fire, any competent ground worker can operate these controls and lower the operator down to the ground safely. Okay, so any competent ground worker can use these lower controls to bring the operator down safely. So in the event that you are working around hydro, you shouldn't even be getting close to this truck if the operator has made contact. You should definitely have the hydro contact information written down somewhere so that you can call in and get a mayday alert as soon as possible. In the event that maybe the truck is on fire for whatever reason and the operator does need to bail out of the bucket, we have on our bucket trucks, we have a rescue bag ready to go to deploy in the event of a rescue. So you can get different kinds of bags. We just made this one up on our own, but it's in a nice waterproof bag that we clip onto the side of the bucket while we're operating it. And what it consists of is simply a sling that wraps around the bucket like so, and that goes around that you can clip into. And it also comes with a long enough rope for this truck, because this truck will reach up to 70 feet. So we have a 75-foot chunk of rope in this bag that is long enough for the operator to reach the ground. Okay, a couple beaners. We have the Petzl rig here, which is a great descent device. And what the operator can do is just hook into this and bail out of the bucket and come down to the ground. No need to worry about other crew members throwing you up a line or a throw line or whatever. You have this ready to go in the need of a rescue.
Okay, so Joel introduced this emergency evacuation kit. I'm just going to demonstrate how to use it and how we utilize it with this bucket truck, with our bucket trucks here at Diamond Tree Care. There are different kits out there. You can buy them complete. You could kind of make up your own. This is the one that we use. It's basically a bark rigging chain from Sterling. Basically we can utilize it in such a way that it fits in between these tight points here created by the plastic of the protected coverings there. So basically, mechanical failure, truck's on fire, any reason, hydraulic line blew out, you need to get down and there's no function. You're not able to use the ground controls or the upper controls. We need to do an evacuation here. So basically we take this rigging chain out, drape it around the bucket. I'm gonna make sure I go under my lanyard. Okay, I'm gonna position this opposite. This is an important step. I'm gonna position this opposite of this step here. Okay, so when I'm training on this, that step is very important for stability when getting out of the bucket. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that like that. Sorry, this device. I'm gonna flip it. Okay, so there's just enough distance there. Now you'll notice, okay, so what happens if this kind of creeps up and over? Highly unlikely that it won't, because there's lips here on this bucket all the way around. Now there's no way it's gonna slough down, obviously, because you have the actual boom connection here. But because there's this lip here, we utilize choke sling in that sense. A lot of people will utilize a running bowline. You can basically just tie a running bowline with a rope, cinch it here, and you have the same effect. We opted for this just for the fact that in an emergency situation you want to be doing as least amount of knot tying and steps as possible. So we know that this is there. All we need to do is just girth it through and it's right there. Okay. So next step would be to load this device and initiate my evacuation. So I'm going to call it all clear and drop this bag. Everybody's all clear?
All clear.
Okay, so I have my rig attached to myself. And I can keep my lanyard still attached. I don't want to unclip yet. I can start to load this. Okay, so I'm putting a lot of pressure on it there. I'm making sure my connections are good and that the device is working properly. Okay, so now I'm going to step out from the bucket on the step. This is where the step's important. You want to make sure you're opposite of the step so that it cinches here and that you can nicely, comfortably step off. Okay, so I've loaded the device. I'm comfortable. This is the point where now you want to unclip your lanyard. If you go any further, you might not be able to reach your lanyard. So I'm secured. I can unclip this and stow it on my harness. Then I can begin my descent. Now, what a lot of companies will do, they'll have a procedure that involves clipping into the lanyard attachment. So Joe, if you want to just get the camera angle on the lanyard attachment, it's right there. Okay, so a lot of people will evacuate from that attachment. Now you can see the position of it would be quite awkward. If I'm going to clip into that, I'd have to come around this plastic piece. A lot of lanyard attachments are outside of the bucket in this position, or even lower. So if that lanyard attachment was down there, and I try and clip into that and rappel down, there's going to be a bit of a drop factor and a swing factor there. This is why we utilize this. It's most comfortable. You have the highest point of attachment that you can get. You have the ability to just nicely descend down from the bucket. Okay, so now I'm descending slowly. Obviously these devices, you can use any descent device. This is the one we use. You want to have a belay hand on there and utilize it in such a way to just nicely come down nice and slow. And that's it. quick and easy way to evac out of a bucket.
So I'm just going to demonstrate some functions that most bucket trucks have. This bucket truck is equipped with a tilt function. So let's say that the operator is unconscious in the bucket. I've successfully lowered him down to the ground, and he's a big guy, and there is no possible way that I'm going to be able to reach inside and pull this guy out. So some of the functions that this truck has a tilt function. So I simply come around to this backside, release the pin. It's just a cotter pin. And then I can come around this side and I can pull this pin out. Just like so. And then I can let him drop just like that. So with this function, I have a better advantage of pulling an operator out of the bucket. Obviously, in the event of a rescue scenario, I would not be bringing the bucket down on top of the truck like we were showing. I'd be bringing the bucket all the way down to the ground where he is easily accessible to the paramedics.
Thanks for watching this session on bucket truck operation.
We've shown you just a couple of the procedures that we use here at Diamond Tree Care. Just want to remind you that every company is different, every truck is different. You're going to have different ways of implementing your rescues or how you set up your bucket truck. But however you do it, just make sure that it's safe and that it follows under the manufacturer guidelines.
We hope you got something out of this video, and we'll see you next time.